Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar, and apologies for our slight delay there. We were just having a little technical issue, as we know that we do from time to time. Let me just... So first of all, I'd just like to say welcome everyone again. Apologies for the delay. Just had a small technical issue there. My name's Grant Whitehouse, and I'm the host for today, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar featuring Tony Hetherington from WorkSafe. Now, just a few housekeeping rules before we kick off. I see everyone's mostly doing the right thing. Maybe just keep yourselves on mute. We're running this just as a standard Zoom meeting, being a not-for-profit and all. So just put yourselves on mute. You can have your camera on or off. We don't mind about that. It's nice to see some happy smiling faces. And then later on, where we have the Q&A, you can use the chat feature in Zoom to send your questions through to us, and we will then take those questions and pass them to Tony and also Gary, obviously, to answer as well. So first of all, what we'd like to do is just to first of all, what we'd like to do is to welcome Gary Morrison, CEO of the NZSA, just to say a few words to kick things off on behalf of the NZSA. Gary, would you like to proceed?
Thanks, Grant. Okay, if I fire away now?
Hit it.
Thanks. Just this issue of health and safety has special relevance for us as an industry. In the last decade, we've had 2 deaths. One in particular highlighted issues for us around poor training, lack of provision of PPE, and just the general induction and the way those staff were treated. And that prompted an issue for us that we really had to look at having a code of practice or a good practice guideline. Earlier this year, we released our document here, the New Security Services in New Zealand Good Practice Guideline, which outlines what we believe represents good practice. And we've been thankful for having WorkSafe endorse that from a health and safety perspective, and just provide some broad guidelines for our industry. And I think that's a really big step forward. That document is available on our website and can also be accessed through the licensing authority as well. So that is a guideline and a document and resource available for everyone in the industry. So I'd just like to thank Tony for his involvement today. I have some technical issues at this side, so I can participate, but I can't hear, which is making it a little bit awkward. So bear with us, and look forward to the presentation today. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Gary. I also just wanted to also, of course, highlight that this is a joint webinar today, and I'm very pleased to have the team from ACES joining us today. Nairi, I see, is on the call as well, so thank you, Nairi, for promoting this out to your members, and it's always great doing these webinars together with you. Right, now we are just looking, we're actually just still waiting on Tony to join, unless Tony's come on a slightly different name. Tony, are you there? No? Tony, can you, if you're there, can you please unmute yourself and let us know that you're there?
Yeah.
Ah, there we go.
Okay.
Ah, here he is.
We seem to have lift off. Is that you were asking about whether or not you should share your screen to have the
that's right, Tony. I've
come up. We have now moved almost entirely to operating on Teams, so I'm using my phone for this. So I'm reliant on you to put the slides up. So I'll just indicate when we move from one slide to the next, if that's okay.
Not a problem. And Tony, just to kick things off, first of all, I do want to welcome you. For those that unaware of Tony Hetherington is from WorkSafe. He's 30 years experience in the UK prior to coming over here to join us in New Zealand. He's been with WorkSafe for 2 years now. His primary role is as the high hazards energy and public safety in charge of that division. But due to some shuffling within the organisation, he has taken on the role of acting Chief Operating Officer for now. And I think Tony will be going back to his previous role once that has been filled. So, Tony, thank you again for coming. Sorry about the little delay we had starting there. But as we know, these things happen. Again, for everyone, hold your questions to the end, write them down if you want to put them into the chat. We'll make sure that we leave a good 10 minutes or so at the end so that we can hear those questions and discuss them fully. So with no further ado, Tony, I will go through to your first slide and you can fire away.
Okay. Well, hello to everyone. I suppose I should just make it clear that my tenure as Chief Operating Officer ends in the middle of next month, being replaced by Pelin Phantom from who's currently with Maritime Agency. So this will be a bit of a swan song for me. Anyway, not to dwell too much on my career. Let's move on to where we are with security. And what I really want to talk to you about first in the main is the sort of big picture of where we are with health and safety in New Zealand. And as the slide indicates, there's a big expectation from government around health and safety in New Zealand, particularly following on from the Pike River tragedy, which basically gave rise to WorkSafe and to the legislative framework built around the Health and Safety at Work Act, and the idea that all PCBUs should do what's reasonably practicable to protect their workforce and the people affected by their work. So I think what we have to start with is there's an expectation on WorkSafe that we will be effective in creating an environment where PCBUs recognise what their duties are and that we provide engage people, we educate people, and where necessary, we take enforcement action to make sure that people do discharge their responsibilities. I think it's a reasonable expectation on all PCBUs that they should do those things. But I think also I want to keep coming back to during my talk that the majority of the things that we expect people to do actually are part of managing an efficient and effective business. And I think you should be looking to consider not what health and safety issues or health and safety procedures is it that I need to tag on to what I do already, is actually that if you're doing what you should be doing and managing your people and your business effectively, good health and safety will almost be a byproduct of that. And I think you should be, when you're thinking, am I doing what is right and required, it's about, are you running your business effectively? And when you're talking about protecting your people, I think you should be thinking along the lines of, there's an adage from the UK, which you may be familiar with, is about your workforce being happy, healthy, and here, which is really you've secured their health and safety, but and that's the healthy part of it. But by doing so, you've actually got them to stay at work. You haven't made them ill, so you're keeping them at work. You're keeping them doing what you want them to be doing. They're healthy doing it, and actually a happy workforce is one which is much more aligned to the business and is more likely to give you full value as they work through their day. So I think that's the expectations and the view that you should bring to health and safety. Looking at the progress slide, which you've already had a quick preview of, this is in a couple of elements. Is, have we made some progress over the last few years with health and safety in New Zealand? Well, in general, yes, and we'll explore that in a bit more detail. But I think we are now at a point where we are in danger of just trying to do more of the same thing, which will, as the next bit of the slide indicates, if we keep repeating the approach, then we'll get what comes next on the slide, which is we'll get more of the same. So unless we change over the next couple of years in our approach to health and safety, then I think we will continue to, or we will not see any more significant improvement. And much of what I want to talk about is actually around how we go about getting that change of attitude and getting people to look at health and safety in the way I've described it as an opener, rather than for people to see it as a tag on at the end. So if we go to the next slide, it shows what was a distinctly worrying trend for us, which was over the first few years, we saw a leveling and a slight decline in fatalities up to 2018, but actually a significant rise again in 2019, not helped by White Island, but even without that, not showing the improvement that we would have hoped for and expected. So we are clearly not on a sustained downward path. So we need to look, as I said, at how we can do things different and better. There's a slightly different profile that you'll see in the next slide, which is about time away from work, which in part shows an increase, but that at least in part is associated with better reporting and people understanding the importance of reporting, measuring and reporting their time away from work. I think you can talk about difficulties around the measurement and the changes are affected by how many people actually were participating. In relation to fatalities, I think it's pretty clear that if there's a fatality, it's measured. Fatalities don't generally go unnoticed. So I think the fatalities figure is really telling us something. I hope that the week away from work figures are actually telling us something, in that we are now beginning to have some impact on that. And that is, those figures are an indication, in the last for 2019 is actually an indication that things are getting better. And then the next slide, the week away from work, is showing some security industry figures, which again actually shows a slight increase, which may represent reporting. And what's not on the slide, but I think you need to be aware of, is what actually are causing these injuries. It's slips, trips and falls. It's musculoskeletal injury, which is people straining backs, pulling muscles, primarily from lifting objects. It's not unsurprisingly a number of assault issues, and we charmingly call it vehicle interactions, but it's basically vehicles manoeuvring, running over, running into your people while they're on site. And all of these things are eminently manageable. And one of the things that I really want to emphasize here is you should be managing them because it's the right thing to do. It's the morally correct thing to do to protect your workforce. But actually, if your workforce are slipping, if they're tripping, if they're hurting their backs, if they're being assaulted, actually they're not coming back to work. All the effort you've put into training them, into getting rosters which will ensure that you can provide appropriate security coverage, etc. It's threatening your business as well by not having those people, as I said earlier, the happy, healthy and here message. So it's important from a WorkSafe point of view, from a discharging your legal responsibilities point of view, that you deal with these issues. But actually, it's also important from your business point of view to deal with these issues. So looking at the next set of slides, these are just looking at the burden of harm around acute injury and what are the other injuries. And what this is really drawing your attention to is there's a big part of when we focused on accidents, it's very much around accidents, but somewhere around 89% of the other stuff that we're interested in WorkSafe is about health and mental well-being. And the important thing for you to remember is if you're simply focusing your efforts on the slips, trips and falls, then you are not addressing what is the bigger part of the risk to your workforce. And the bigger part of the risk to your workforce, and also the bigger part of for your industry a lot of the time, is whether the people are actually turning up for work as well. So we're talking about 11% being things like slips and trips and falls, but actually the 89% is things like stress or exposure to chemicals. And the stress part in your business particularly is if you've been assaulted or you're in fear of assault as you're working, what better ways than to exacerbate any stress or mental incapacity that any of your workforce may have. So don't just think about the 90% or the 89% of other stuff as being things that you can't deal with. Many of them are open to you to I was going to say attack, but that's the to address and to be quite honest about your industry. Going back to your good practice guidelines, actually many of these issues are addressed within that. So what we're asking for here is actually things that the industry itself, when it's sitting down in the cold light of day, actually agrees that are reasonable things for it to do. So I think what I want you to do is to remember to not just focus on the safety part of health and safety, to think very much about the health part of health and safety. And also to remember, that's a global figure at the bottom, but best estimates are failures in health and safety are costing the country, costing industry, costing business owners like you something around about $2 billion a year. So not a small target to be aiming at. And again, indicative that it is not only appropriate for you to manage these risks because it's the right thing to do from a moral, discharging your moral and criminal liabilities, but actually it's good for your business as well. So looking at the next slide, this is particularly about work-related health and psychosocial issues, and also indicating on the left, you've got the effects of work on health, all of the things that can affect health at work. So there's biological risks that can be anything from infection for someone, for example, somebody on security duty, their risks from being contracting COVID or some other similar transmitted disease from a member of the public or others. There's psychosocial risks, that's around the potentially mental health, security feelings if you're about to be assaulted, that sort of thing. There's the physical risks, that's the slips, trips and falls, or the interactions with vehicles and things like that, which can be an issue. Ergonomic risks, that's the lifting, carrying, musculoskeletal problems, and chemical risks, which is You know, are you being exposed to anything from asbestos through to toxic or corrosive chemicals at work? And those are often the things that we think about when we're thinking about the health and safety at work of our employees. But I think you've got to look to the right-hand side of the diagram as well and think about the effects of health on work. Is that this is a two-way thing. If people are not healthy when they're working, they are more likely to be impaired in that their judgment may not be all it should be. They may not be as fit as or as nimble as they should be, so they could be more likely to slip or trip. They may have mobility issues, again, increasing the likelihood of them slipping, tripping, and sensory risks. If they're not well and healthy, they may miss warnings, all of that sort of thing. So remember that there is a two-way linkage here between the impacts that work can have on the health of the individual, and that can also impact their ability to do the job. And then, because their ability to do the job is reduced, that may also exacerbate the extent to which they're likely to be affected or exposed to risks. So do try to remember that this isn't just a stationary single consideration of what is the exposure. Is also remember what impacts might the exposure be having on people, and how might that further impact their exposure to the same or possibly a different risk. So moving on to the next slide. Again, this is repeating some things around work-related health and what WorkSafe are currently focusing on and building our capacity. The top one, mentally healthy work. The team's a primary point of contact for all matters related to preventing mental harm and managing risks to mental health at work, both internally and externally. When I say internally and externally, I mean we are using the same skill set and the same approach to making sure that we manage risks to our staff as we expect PCBUs to use in relation to managing risks to their staff. We're updating and extending our mentally healthy work guidance material resources, much of which you will be able to access via the website. And we're developing our training for investigators, inspectors and champions to help them to better inform people, PCBUs and others, when we're undertaking assessments and inspections to help people actually achieve good standards of control. And we will be investigating reports of known work-related mental health risks for which there's evidence of mental harm arising from or exacerbated by work. Now, I want to be clear that we're not saying everyone who suffers depression or stress is automatically suffering depression or stress because of the work environment. But around 20% of people, as an estimate, their primary reason for being stressed or depressed is associated with working conditions. And as I've said, the two-way process, the two-way relationship between health and the effects of health on work, it's important for you to not only just think about how is what I'm asking my workforce to do affecting their mental health, but actually is their mental health affecting their ability to do the work that I'm asking them to do effectively. We're also looking at things like carcinogens and airborne risks, accelerated silicosis. I'm not sure that for your industry is particularly a problem, but we've found that exposure to silica in engineered stone is able to induce silicosis in very short timescales. So it's important to control that exposure. We're particularly also looking at methyl bromide, which is widely used as a fumigant in the timber industry, and the work-related health risk management, which is really about biological, physical and chemical exposure. And the Kamahi Hawarari team that we're developing is effectively, although we have several people with occupational and nursing experience within our inspectorate, we're drawing them all together into a single team so that we can much better coordinate the work that we do in that area. So I'm expecting over the next 12 to 18 months that we really are upping our game in that particular area. Okay, I think we've done that. Yes, the next one. So, time to adapt. So I think what we've looked at today demonstrates conclusively that we're not making enough of a difference at the moment. And when I say we, I accept that WorkSafe needs to do better. And if WorkSafe does better, that means it stimulates people like you to do better. So part of the reason for doing things like today is actually to share with you the sorts of things we're hoping that you will take on board and think about and do. And now we have to look at this as a system as a whole. You know, we will be working not only with PCBUs and trade associations such as yours, but actually also, for example, on the mentally healthy work side of things, is actually also beginning to do things with the medical professions so that they begin to recognise possibly more clearly than they do the link between work, health, and the impacts of health on work. So it isn't just that, you know, the side of WorkSafe's activities that you may see appear to be entirely directed towards PCBUs, but actually that's only part of our work. We are looking at the whole of the system around how we can better stimulate our story. Better stimulate people to act in these areas. And I suppose that's another thing that I think we all recognise that we have to do, which is around telling. We've called it telling our story, but I think that rather underplays the significance of what I mean by that. I think that's about sharing and helping people to understand why there is such a need for New Zealand to take a much more proactive approach to managing health and safety. And really just to emphasize that this isn't going to cripple business. It's never entirely comparing like with like, but comparing the UK, where most of my experience is, to New Zealand. New Zealand is killing and injuring somewhere between 4 and 6 times as many people per as a rate than in New Zealand. So there's plenty of scope for us to do better in New Zealand. So looking next at the next slide, which is again slightly enigmatic, is work versus health and safety. And again, I think this is just about trying to talk about the fact that we sometimes think of work and health and safety as different things. And I think what I really want to emphasize is that WorkSafe, you may perceive us as being the people who just say, no, you can't do that. And actually, there is an element of that, and there is an element of the PCB population who probably the only way we're going to be able to interact with them is to say, no, you can't do that, and be the inverted commas policeman. But I think what we want to do is to actually say there's a bigger picture here, that we recognize that work is in general good for people. It gives them an income, it gives them self-esteem, it gives them a purpose. And whilst I've been talking about the downsides or the potential downsides of work, what I really want to be clear about is we want to see people at work. We want to see people doing work which is meaningful, which adds to their health, their well-being, and their self-esteem. So what we want to do is to work with you as employers to make sure that you see work in the same way, and that by safeguarding your workforce, not only do you help them, but you help yourselves by both discharging your legal risks to look after your people, but actually by looking after your people will have a better motivated workforce, which actually is at your work site more than if it was demotivated, ill, and regularly taking time off work. And I really do want to emphasize that we do see that wider picture and hope that you will share that vision with us. Looking at the next slide now, please. Yeah, this is really just about, again, another way of saying the same thing is don't look at health and safety as being, you know, let's just deal with the liability associated with work, but actually see work as fulfilling a social purpose, and that you are contributing to society, not just by the services you bring and the security. You know, coming from the UK, I'm surprised still that often the levels of security that I see in New Zealand are pleasingly less rigorous than I may have been used to seeing in certain areas. But you know, you have to recognise that the security of our people is a really important and is likely to be of growing importance within New Zealand. So you, as an industry, you have a clear social purpose. And I want you to see that you deliver not only a good security service, but also that in delivering that, you support your people and discharge a social purpose through your, not just through the end products of your work, but actually help the social purpose by providing a good environment and a good working conditions for your people. Moving on to the last, well, no, not quite the last slide. I think also what I've got to say is there's no free passes here. I've said that in general, we really do want to work with PCBUs. We don't expect to be able to prosecute our way to excellent health and safety performance across the country. But I think what I have to say is we want to work with people, we want to engage people, we want to educate people, and we hope that that will lead to improved standards. But let me be quite clear. We remain a regulator. We have a legislative responsibility, and we will use our powers both to require people to conform, and where necessary, we will use our powers to ensure that those who have transgressed significantly are actually brought to account. So there will be times when we will prosecute, and I make no apologies for that. However, again, I do want to emphasize the fact that for those of you who are the health and safety enthusiasts in the audience, I want to emphasize that we really do want to take much more of a safety 2 rather than the safety 1 approach. For those who are maybe less nerdy than the likes of me, what that really means is safety 1 is really about emphasizing that we don't do things or we control things because we stop the bad things happening. Safety 2 is much more about focusing on how do your operations, 95% of the time they go perfectly well. So what is it we do that makes sure that we can continue into the next 5% to make sure that things continue to go right, and making this a positive about things going right and setting up ourselves for success, rather than putting just constraints in which will avoid failure. And I think that's a significant change of emphasis in the way that you may want to think about how you manage your businesses. And then next slide, please. This is a slightly out of sync slide, but I will cover it while I'm here. One of the things that I wanted to just say around the potentially increasing levels of security in New Zealand as both terrorist and possibly COVID-19 threats is there will be much more emphasis around managing the flows of people and crowds. And one of the things that we've been looking at is what are potential catastrophic events which could lead to multiple injuries. And one of them has been around failures in crowd control. And one of the things that we found was most significant in many of the crowd incidents was that they come from often a well-used system had an extra impediment put in the way that the people flowed through openings or down steps or round corners, that sort of thing. So if you are being asked to introduce new security barriers or to stop people at particular pinch points in a crowd, is actually make sure that whoever is asking you to introduce these things has actually thought of the impacts on crowd management. I think really I just want to alert you to, it isn't, whilst security and barriers are often a good thing, is actually don't introduce new processes like this unless you've actually thought through the impact of what that might have on the way the crowd itself moves and flows. So that slide wasn't quite where I expected it to be, but if we move on to the next one, this is really about emphasizing what I was saying about safety one or safety two versus safety one. Is really the safety one is seeing people as the problem. Let's stop people making the errors. And actually safety two is looking very much more at people as the solution. People as the solution in two ways is how can we help people to continue to get the job right, but also people as the solution in that you actually ask the people who are doing the work how work is done and why work goes well mostly, so that you are actually taking account of the people who know how work is done on a day-to-day basis. You are not parachuting somebody in who has a look at what they think is day-to-day business, but actually is consulting with your workforce, with your supervisors, and making sure that you are using the insights that they have in actually developing your business. So finally, we've tried to encapsulate most of the concepts that I've talked about people as a solution, about concentrating on the value that work brings for people, that creates for New Zealand's economy, is actually we're looking at better work. We're looking at actually seeing health and safety as a component of better work, and that for those who are interested in developing their management of their business and their approach, we hope that actually seeing developing better systems of work and how you do your work and how you contribute to improving the lot of your workforce will actually be seen as a positive, rather than seeing health and safety as just this thing, which there are a few things which actually we must not do and we must stop our people from doing, is actually seeing health and safety being a product of equipping our people to do the right thing and providing them an environment in which the right thing will actually happen. And that will come out of what we've sort of summarized on the next slide, which is good work design, which is just really saying again, and if you haven't got this message by now, I'm not sure how I can say it in a different way, is, having a healthy, safe and productive workforce, and some comments from across the country, across the Antipodes, is Safe Work Australia have said well-designed, healthy and safe work will allow workers to have more productive lives. And if workers are having more productive lives, their productivity contributes to the productivity of your organisation. So again, a virtuous circle. Look after your people, they will look after you. And New Zealand's improving work-related health outcomes by reducing physical and mental health risks. And there's an emphasis on getting everyone involved early on to consider everything for healthier tasks, jobs and work. So it's really just another way of emphasising that designing of the work is as important as designing the control measures. And finally, user-centred design. Actually, is the work fit for purpose? Are you actually delivering what you need to do in the way that you need to, by the way that you do things? Is the work that you're asking for actually doable by the actual workforce that you have? Again, coming back to actually talking to your workforce and making sure that what you're asking for and what you think is being done is actually what is happening and is actually then delivering the benefits that you're expecting. So that's another way of saying, is work as done the same as you imagine work is done? And again, you want to be clear and sure that the things that you're asking to be done and which your clients are often paying for to be done are being done in the way that you expect. So again, there's a good link between knowing what your people are doing and so that you can protect their health and safety, but actually also knowing what your people are doing so that you know that what you're delivering from the client is what the client is actually expecting. And I suppose the other thing to say is that this, as I've said, it all sounds great and easy, but actually you'll find, like us, that these things don't just, you don't just have a think about them and you get it right first time. You do have to go around and learning an iterative loop, taking account of what you've learned about foreseeable misuse, what you've learned about better engagement of your workforce. So I think the final message to you is I have been preaching the benefits of better work and integrating health and safety into your business, but I am certainly accepting that it isn't necessarily an easy or simple task, but I am saying it is worth doing from a moral and a legal point of view, but it is also worth doing because it will help your business to grow and develop, because your people will do what you're hoping they will do more efficiently, but you won't get it right first time. You do have to keep working at this. So from my point of view, that was all I wanted to say. So I'm ready for questions if that helps.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tony. That was really interesting. I've just put a request in there. If anyone wants to just throw a question into the text, they can. But alternatively, if you've got your microphone there and you just want to take yourself off mute and call it out. Just while we're waiting for those, I mean, that was really fascinating. I thought I was quite surprised about the four to six times rate of injuries or deaths in the UK in New Zealand compared to the UK. It's quite a lot. Obviously, forestry and perhaps high country farming's got a bit to do with that, but quite a stunning figure that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the important thing to say is, the statistic, what is at work in the UK doesn't include some driving things, and so it is it's not a precise, if you multiply it by 4.35 you get exactly the rate, but it is of that sort of order of magnitude. Yes.
Yeah, right. Wow. Fantastic.
So Kenneth Mackenzie here. I've got a question, if you don't mind.
Far away.
Okay. Nope. Fire away.
Tony, I hear everything you've been saying, having come from the other side of the ditch where we went down this path in transport construction in New South Wales for quite some time, post 2008. And one of the things that I've wanted to challenge New Zealand to do in the last 4.5 years as a part of the adoption of the new rail safety or the new safety laws is in the high risk industries in particular, which is where most of the fatalities are generally aligned and potentially most of the significant LTIs, is to consider adopting an actual competency assessment process for the white collar workers who are supervising those on the ground doing the actual job around their appetite for safety and risk management. What's their risk appetite? And by going down that path, you actually determine what their unconscious competence is towards risk and safety, and are they actually doing the task that they're assigned to do. It's not about just their competency and knowledge to fill a position description for the job they're employed for. It assesses whether they're actually competent to undertake the tasks they're assigned to do in accordance with the expectations of the organisation, aligned with legislation. So it's a systematic approach to safety that actually delivers a benchmark. And when you look at it from how we developed it and adopted it in transport construction, we took the LTFRI, the LTFIFR, from 27 significant lost time injuries per million man hours worked down to 0.7 in 4 years and no fatalities, because the attitudes of the people who are expected to deliver the safety from a supervisory level are actually deemed competent to undertake that task on behalf of the organisation. And it's not about a tick and flick out the door process. It's about ensuring they have the competency to do the task for the assurance of the company, and they have the confidence that the company knows they're competent to do the job they've engaged them to do. And it's a seriously successful system and process. It was adopted in New South Wales under my leadership in 2008, 2009, and became national in 2012 across the rail sector. So that's something I think that the high risk industries, in particular, security, forestry, fisheries, farming, for example, are the ones who could really benefit from that approach.
Yes, I mean, I think the, coming back to the, what is the inescapable theme of what I've been saying is part of that is also about bringing into the process is seeing it as being much more of an integral part of the business, and making sure that people are seeing it as part of managing the whole business, not just about managing the add-on, the bolt-on of safety. So I don't think I've got any argument with you at all.
It's all about it. It's a seriously strong tool to integrate cultural safety leadership, because it does start at the top with the assessment process and filters down through the ranks. So it's something that I'd be more than happy to explore with you further if you were interested.
Yes, I mean, are you aware of Daniel Hummerdal?
No.
Okay. It might be worth, if you've got anything, if you want to mail me, I'll pass it on to Daniel and get him to contact you. Okay. He's our head of innovation, and he's leading the sort of intellectual thought behind our Better Work project.
Yeah. Okay.
Brilliant. We've only got a few minutes to go, so I've got a couple more questions here, which have come in through the text, so I'll fire them through to you, Tony. We've got Gerardo is coming in from Mexico City. Thank you for joining us. He says, greetings from Mexico City. Thanks to the NZSA and Mr. Hetherington for sharing your knowledge. The question is, the World Health Organization and other regional health organizations are very concerned about mental health in the global population. Its consequence in violence. Many organizations expect an increase in home, work and service point violence. Your thoughts and recommendations. So mental health and how that's affecting both what happens at the workplace, at home and at service points.
Right. Okay. There's a whole load of things there, and many of which I don't think anybody really has a definitive answer to yet.
Sure.
Certainly, we recognise that it's almost the easiest part to attack is the mental health associated with large organisations, and as a relative success, I think in New Zealand, we had quite a lot of concern around bullying and other sorts of behaviour that were leading to stress and depression within the legal profession, and particularly in some of the major companies in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And I think we were quite effective in dealing with that. In actually, really, we, worked with the worker representatives to actually call out to the industry and to those particular big players in this that, again, the two sides of the equation here, which is you have a responsibility to deal with this as a work issue and a work health and safety issue, but actually it's a major damage to your business. And I think that particular industry has taken that on board and is being much more proactive about the managing of those issues. But so that's the sort of good news. If you're saying to me again, what is the impact of, particularly with COVID-19, and I in New Zealand, I don't think we may underestimate how lucky we are by being largely shielded from some of the things that my folks talk to in England about. They are working from home. My daughter, for example, has been working from home for the last 9 months. And is expecting to have to work from home for several more months, and she's finding that she's lucky in that she's living in a house with 4 other people her age and is enjoying life. But if you happen to live on your own and you're in that sort of situation and you've got relatively little social contact outside of work as well, then small problems build up. And again, you get the two-way impact of what's the mental, what is work doing to people's mental health, but possibly in these situations, what is the impact of people's broader mental health on their ability to work effectively. And I think that's one of the challenges that, frankly, if you're asking me for an easy solution, I haven't got one. But I do think that is, something that over the next the psychologists and the healthy work people will across the world be exploring, is how much more and what ways can we better support people when they're working from home, working on new technology. So even when they're interfacing with people as we are, it isn't the same interfacing with people across video as it is face to face. I certainly, when we had our period of lockdown in New Zealand and I was working from home, some discussions you have with people can be quite wearing and tiring anyway. But I found after 8 or 10 hours in trying to have those same sort of conversations with people over video link, I was absolutely shattered. Yeah. So I think there is a lot around the question you ask. I'm not sure that yet I have really good, solid answers for you.
let's park that. I've got another specific one here. Another one. How best do we handle roles where a customer is expecting one person to perform the role, where, for example, the police might require double staffing for that same role? So, one expectation from private sector, one from the public sector.
Okay. I think there's two parts to that answer. I think number one is actually, I think you need to have a fairly robust conversation with your client about what service are they expecting, and whether it is reasonable for them to pay for, because we come down to this, it's pay for two people. And the other side of the equation as well is with you, is the police go in twos, because if they see anything happening, by and large, I expect them, and I think most parts of the population expect them to do something about it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not saying that I expect in every circumstance a policeman to engage a gang of 50 people in a hand-to-hand combat or anything like that. I'm not expecting them to be sort of some gung-ho heroes, but I think I am expecting them to generally take action. And I think with your industry, my expectation of the action your people will take will be much more about identifying that there's an issue, and if there's risk to them and they are on their own, etc., is stepping back and looking for, how do I get assistance to do this? So, I think there is, it's not a binary, you do it in singly or you do it in pairs, partly because even doing it in pairs, you can be lulling yourself into a false sense of security. But it's actually, what are the procedures you have around the lone individual that they can tap into to get support, about them having the confidence that it isn't for them necessarily to intervene directly. So I think there is that robust conversation with the client, but actually be clear about what service it is you're delivering when you're providing a single person, and actually be very rigorous about what that single person has access to and the protections that they can call upon if things start to go wrong. Or, I don't want to say call upon once things start to go wrong, is actually then be clear about when they come across an issue, how they behave.
Awesome. Well, we've gone a couple of minutes over, so I think we should wrap this up. Thank you for those that provided questions. Thank you, Tony, for your presentation. We've had some really good feedback already popping in on the chat for that. Much appreciated. Gary Morrison, thank you for being a host, along with Nairi from the team from ACES. Always good to have you guys in with us. We really appreciate your time today. Sorry about the little technical issues at the front, but we all got there in the end, and I think certainly that was a really interesting conversation. So again, if you've got any follow-ups, you can email Gary. I'd say he's always our first port of call, and if you've got any further questions, and of course Tony, we can interact with you if there's anything that we feel that the team might want to say and pass on to you and the team at WorkSafe. So thank you again, Tony.
Okie doke. All right, pleasure and good luck.
Great. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Appreciate you coming on board, and